Gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar, Step-by-Step Roadmap to Landing Meetings with Hiring Managers at Your Target Organizations. Experiencing technical difficulties during the WebEx session, viewing the presentation, or with your audio quality, please dial 1-866-229-3239 for the WebEx live event technical support. Outside of the U.S., please use 1-408-435-7088. During the presentation, all our attendees will be in a listen-only mode. So looking at the list of attendees, because of privacy requirements, you will see yourself listed. So let's go get started, and I'll turn the call over to Christine Tatro. Please go ahead.
June. This is Christine Tatro, Associate Director, Alumni Career and Professional Development. And I'd like to welcome you to our Spring 2012 Career Management Webinar Series. We're pleased that so many of you are joining us today for Step-by-Step, the roadmap to landing meetings with hiring managers at your target organizations. And we guest presenter Sarah Stambouli of Stambouli Career Consulting today. She's going to walk us through how you can conduct a more efficient and effective search, focusing on the specific techniques and tools to clearly target your next role and effectively access the hidden job market. Focusing on understanding the hidden job market and why it should comprise the bulk of your search activities, the 200 positions target spreadsheet tool. She'll look at some specific techniques to be used through LinkedIn, and then talk about best practices and templates to utilize when you are trying to introduce yourself to a hiring manager. Our webinar is being recorded today, and the slides are available now. Earlier today, the slide deck was emailed to you at the address you used to register for this program. You may also find the slide deck on our career homepage at www.alumni.hbs.edu/careers. We are hosting a 60-minute program today, and we will take your questions. If you'd like to submit written questions, please look to the floating toolbar in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Click the question mark button to open the Q&A panel. Type question in the space at the bottom, and then hit the send button. We will address everyone's question in the course of today's presentation, but we will attempt to address the questions being asked by the majority of you first. Just to note, you will not see other attendee questions, only your own that you submit. So it's time. I'm very pleased to turn the presentation over to Sarah Stambouli.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm really excited to be talking to you about this topic because it's very important, and it's mysterious sometimes even to otherwise very sophisticated candidates, because it's unclear what people mean by the hidden job market sometimes. And since it's out that most of my clients get their new jobs, I love talking about it. And I first started working with business school alumni. I had a similar job to Christine, running alumni career services for Columbia Business School here in the city. And then I've been out on my own doing full-time career consulting. So I've gotten the opportunity to work with a number of Harvard Business School alumni, as well as lots of other professionals. And while some absolutely do get jobs through headhunters and job postings, these are incredibly helpful. And I've enjoyed helping clients from work. My background is in banking and technology and not-for-profit. I used to work at Morgan Stanley and Cantor Fitzgerald, as well as and Northern Networks. And so let's get started. We're going to begin with a poll, and you should see on the right of your screen some questions, and I would love you all to quickly pop in your answers, and we can see where we're all at in terms of your employment situation and your confidence about the hidden job market before we get started. It's helpful to me so I can get a sense of how many of you are working full-time and trying to job hunt at night and the weekends, and how many are job hunting full-time. And we can talk about good ways to focus search that way. So interested to see how confident you are about the hidden job market. I think we will be getting answers quite soon. I do a drum roll, but I just don't have one available quite yet. Oh, here we go. All right. So 30% of you are unemployed and job hunting full-time, so this will be extremely helpful. Another 32% of you are working and job hunting actively or somewhat, and the rest of you are one that's for the future, planning to job hunt down the road and working. Okay, so it's a humble group. 49% of you feel like your skills at the hidden job market are relatively weak, another 38% average, and only 11% think they're good and just could use a few tips. So hopefully you'll find this helpful. That's fantastic. Okay. So the only thing is, I think I need another second to maybe close that to advance the screen. Okay. Super. All right. So just to clarify what I mean by the hidden job market and the formal job market. So the formal job market I define as executive search, recruiters, headhunters, whatever you call it, those folks who get hired to find candidates for the companies, as well as job postings, otherwise ads. And sometimes recruiters put out ads, but all that I would say I would define as the formal job market. And then the hidden job market would be everything else. So that would comprise networking. So that would be contacting potential hiring managers through a mutual connection. And a lot of times people don't separate these two out. And direct contact, which should be contacting potential hiring managers without a mutual connection. But oftentimes people refer to networking as both, but that's a formal definition. We'll be focusing a lot on the second part. So this is the interesting thing here. A lot of clients who get fabulous, high-paid, prestigious jobs are still not good candidates for the formal job market. There's a correlation between how candidate you are in general and whether you're a good candidate for the formal job market. It has to do with some other things in mind. So executive recruiters and intern recruiters, who are the people that are reading the resumes submitted online, are looking for some very narrow, are looking to fill very narrow, defined jobs. And so it's just got to do with whether you fit that category rather than how great you are in general. They specifically like people that are employed or have worked at premier organizations, attended elite undergrad and graduate schools. We got that one covered. And doing a very similar job to the open position. And linear, gap-free careers without a lot of short jobs. And if it makes you feel any better, if that's not all you, except for the one in the middle, most of the clients are in that situation. So most people, especially get older, do not meet all these conditions all the time. It's sort of unrealistic. And while certainly recruiters may want to speak to you if you don't fit this perfectly, if you're changing jobs or looking to do something at all different, that's when the hidden job market becomes not just valuable, but kind of invaluable. So it's the place to focus most of your search, and we'll tell you exactly how to do that, so it's not so vague. It's worth thinking about how these job opportunities become available. So I'm saying hidden job market opportunities arise this way. In some ways, all job opportunities arise this way. Things don't start with a job posting, right? So a manager becomes aware of what you could almost call a labor need. Even if it's a very senior level labor need, that pays 7 figures, it's still a labor need. So he or she's thinking, I got some work that isn't getting done, my group's overworked, I'm overworked, we don't have the right skill set, we advantage some business opportunities. We could if we had the right people here, etc. But that manager doesn't jump on it right away. It doesn't think like, oh, I'm going to call a recruiter today, and I'm going to create a job description and post it. They stall and they procrastinate because that's a lot of work and it's difficult and it's unclear which path to go, and it's busy. That they're so busy they need help, and so they don't have time. And so they often at that point ask around who might fit and try and find some informal way to fill the job. That is the period of golden opportunity. So what can happen is if you come and you meet someone at that stage, you ask about their needs, they start talking about what they need help with, you can call them out. You're very skilled at it, and the part 2 of this talks about this a little bit more, but you can get them suddenly are really dissatisfied upon talking to you and talking about all the help they need with continuing as is, and hopefully they will think about who might be good for the job, and there you are. And the odds of this happening exactly when the manager is in that frame of mind are not so high, but there's ways to ensure that that manager will think of you or hear about you when the time comes as well. So we'll talk about that. Okay. So before we get going any further, I'd like to talk about the importance of having a really clear, specific job target. And I mean like an open job or a job posting at one place. I mean a type of work, a type of role, because again, we're not going to be focusing on open jobs. We're just going to be thinking about, you can almost think of them as seats, like a filled or an open position is a job. And a type of role that they have at different organizations usually that you want to get. Very specific. And one of the counterintuitive things is the more specific your target, often the shorter your search for a number of reasons. You want it very, very clear. Now, some people have more than one target, and they ideally like to get people to a place where they're able to make their first choice. And this choice can be a combination of how practical the target is and how excited they are about the target. And so a lot of time, they might hold out for the target they're most excited about. They feel like they get a job a lot sooner, so they go for the practical one. But for a reason to be really sure, on board, and not too conflicted about your first choice target will shorten your search. And I don't recommend that people, the reason I don't recommend people go after multiple targets is that it's better to prepare as thoroughly and properly as I think is ideal for a job, so that you know everything about it, you've done a lot of homework, you know all the players, you're going to sound like an insider with a lot of different targets at the same time. So this is the reason that I recommend going after one at a time. And you may have heard people talking about a target having 200 jobs. This was an idea that was started by the 5 o'clock Club, and it's a great idea. Now, sometimes, especially in the middle of the worst part of the recession, people say 200 jobs. There's not 200 jobs open in the whole city, much less in my little line of leverage finance or whatever. But it doesn't have to be 200 open jobs. It's 200 seats. Think of actual chairs almost that someone's doing that's like the target you want. And if there's 200 positions, filled or open, that's a big enough target that if you do a good search, you'll get a job in a reasonable period of time, all things being equal. And it doesn't have to be all your first choice targets. So if your first choice target is 50, and they'll have to add up to that, it's just a good sense. And often, most of the time, people's targets are that big, and it's not an issue. If you're a senior, it might be a little harder. Okay. So this is a spreadsheet that I wanted you to have access to that is a great way to really help you make sure that you completely understand all about your target and help you explain it better to others by putting it in perspective. So it's a little hard to see here, but we're going to break it into smaller parts. But it's really letting you know how it helps you list out all jobs, all the organizations you want to look at, all jobs that might be right for you, and where they fit in the organization. So this could be a startup, a not-for-profit, a large, pharmaceutical company. Could be government. Could be anything. And help you be very thorough about exploring all the organizations that you'd like to work at. So we're talking about meetings a lot, informational interviews, exploratory meetings, and I want to clarify. I like to define things so you understand. understand, any meeting to me that is not an official job interview where everyone understands it to be a job interview for a specific job fits in the category. And so you can call them informational meetings, exploratory meetings, but I'm going to talk about different purposes for those. Talk about informational interview type 1. This one you're still trying to refine your target and choose. It's really sort of a genuine informational meeting. It could be at a very senior level, but what you would be doing at this point, and I really recommend that people do this if they're not sure about what target to pick first, if they feel like they can't decide, it's usually because they don't have enough information. So I recommend that you meet with a few people more at your level in the job or the jobs you're considering, and asking them really detailed questions about qualifications, job duties, organizational structure, and that can help. So that's informational interview type 1. And this is the first part of that spreadsheet, so I'll talk how you might use this to help clarify your target. So, okay, let's say you think you want to be an analyst. You need to get really clear about that. Not only do you have to be clear yourself, of course, but you need to be clear when you're telling people, or people can't help you so well. So let's say you're deciding between being a sell-side analyst and a buy-side analyst. It's very different targets. Now, at JP Morgan, they actually have both because they have asset management. But let's say, so you'd want to find the organization, you'd want to find the division, who you want to be, and somebody that you might do this column about someone doing a similar role to the one you're doing. That's someone at your level. That's someone you would talk to get background information for an informational interview, or just informational interview to give your interviewing skills and help you choose which target. And so when I got on LinkedIn, those are names that actually came up when I put in those organizations that I am second degree connected to. And so I went into advanced people search in LinkedIn. I put in JP Morgan and put in analyst and I put in research, and I was able to come up with these names. And each one of these people are someone that I genuinely could get a meeting with if I were qualified, that I'm sure would introduce me if I was interested in becoming an analyst, and I could get some more information. And so advanced people search in LinkedIn is the magic place for a lot of this research. And then about another type of informational interview. This is a type where you know what your target is, you have decided, but you haven't that exact job, and you might think you know everything about that job, and you might think you're ready to start interviewing with hiring managers. But if you haven't, I exhort you, encourage you, beg you to have a few meetings with people, let's at your level, who are doing that job. Because just because you might work with them, maybe they're your counterpart in your job, doesn't mean that you know every little thing about how they're organized. And it's very helpful. It can help you interview much more strongly if you have those meetings with them. Because the best interview techniques to talk about talking about the work they need done, as opposed to having your resume hashed out, which I know is never too popular. And so that will make you be able to do that a lot better. Know the ins and outs. So I've talked about LinkedIn a lot, and I know that Harvard Business School had a great 90-minute webinar that you all have access to listen to about specifics to do with LinkedIn as well. So I'm not going to hash it out. I know you're a pretty sophisticated group, most of you, but some of you certainly might want help with your profiles. So you want to build an attractive profile. If you have a picture, it's very important that you be smiling, because a lot of what you're using it for is asking for a meeting through someone. And you kind of want to seem like, spending some time with you won't be a drag. So you're professional, but also sort of nice, fun, not too serious. And then you want to link to people, of course. And so I advise that you don't want to be linking to strangers, because strangers wouldn't be comfortable introducing you. But you need to be too picky, in my opinion, about who you link to, or too sort of, snobby or something. Anyone could know the person that you want to meet. And as long as you feel comfortable introducing them to some of your connections, and they might feel comfortable introducing you to some of their connections, I would say that's a great standard. An idea, of course, is to join alumni. Certainly Harvard Business School will be the first one to put up there. Corporate and industry LinkedIn groups is another way to build your network a bit. And you can upload your contacts into LinkedIn to speed that up as well. If this is a bit confusing, absolutely, you can get some help from lots of resources about that as well. Okay, so I don't work for LinkedIn. That's my disclaimer. They don't pay me. I wish they did for how helpful I find it. And then a lot of people will say, in fact, I think the last webinar's title was, I'm on LinkedIn, so what now? And again, of course, I know everyone knows this, it's just software. What's helpful about it is it lets you sort of pick the brains of everybody that you know without bothering them. So I'm here with my fabulous office manager, Hallie, and I can see who she knows and who she doesn't know without bothering her, and then decide if I wanted to ask for an introduction at a later date. I don't have to call up every single person I've ever met to find out if anybody knows anyone at a certain organization. I can look on LinkedIn and only ask a favor of the correct person. So it speeds things up tremendously, but these other resources are very important. Online directories can, for instance, some of you are CFAs and might belong to the New York Securities sorry, I just drew a little blank. It happens when you're nervous. NYSA. Those of you in New York, I just am spacing on what it stands for, but that's a fabulous online directory. There's a lot. Don't forget about your undergrad as well. But be very careful to make sure you're updated on these and that you have an updated LinkedIn profile. I just to throw one thing more out there. For those that are working, especially, sometimes people are hesitant to be very active on LinkedIn because they are working and they don't want people to know it works. And so one of the first things I do with my clients is we adjust their settings so that when they do work on it and make changes, it doesn't get announced to the world, so that it's a little subtler. And I recommend that you do that and make sure that your headline, which is the thing that is right below not your job title, but right below your name, is ideal. It shows what you're looking for. It sort of sums you up well, and if you're employed, it includes an employer because it just makes you look a little stronger. And you want to have an appropriate level of detail. It's customary for people maybe at hedge funds and lawyers to have a little less detail, not that you couldn't have more. People that are in other fields, in marketing, in training-related jobs or business jobs, to have a bit more. But you do want to have enough information in there that if someone were searching for a candidate using keywords, that you would come up. And so those are just some basic tips. And we've had such a great review of that, and I know a lot of you are pretty sophisticated with this. In terms of building a network, it is worth trying to link to as many contacts as you can, though, because then when you try these techniques later on, you're just more likely to get hits. So I encourage you to be a little bit more outgoing than might be comfortable every day, and you may be surprised at how helpful people are. And I would consider uploading your contacts, which we can tell you more about and is discussed in the last webinar. Okay. So now to the good part that you all came to hear about, getting exploratory meetings with hiring managers via the hidden network. The hidden job market. I don't know about a hidden network. But if you know, tell me. Okay. So specifically, you want to be identifying specific managers with a name and a role at your target organizations that are well situated to hire you if they had a need for your skills. Use as many of these managers as possible, and you want to take time to understand their needs and get them excited about the work you could do for them. That's the process. And you might, well, duh, but I want to sort of distinguish this a bit from general networking. I have a lot of clients that know they're supposed to network. They might go to Harvard Business School alumni events. They might do general industry networking, and they don't get why it's not getting them anywhere. And that's because while there can be benefits to general networking, targeted networking is a lot more efficient, and we'll talk about that.
It's Christine. Can I jump in here for a couple questions? Okay. And actually on this point, with some questions around what about people who are currently working and they're anticipating a job search in 6 to 12 months. How much of this should they be doing now? Because you were talking about the networking versus the targeted job search. Can you speak a little bit about
That point, I think getting your LinkedIn profile where you want it to be and building up your network is definitely something you can do at any point, is a good idea. If you're not positive about what your next target is, I think it's a great time to set up some very casual meetings with people just to learn a little bit more about what they do. In those cases, I would definitely recommend going through friends and trying to keep it relatively low key. And there's no harm in just saying, I want to learn a little bit more about your organization for the long haul. In fact, that's one of the techniques I recommend everyone do, even if they are looking on the short term, is to imply it for the long term, so that if there isn't an opening now, there's still a reason for the person to talk to them. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a little bit of a judgment call, but if they anticipate being able to be very much in demand and they don't want to disappoint people, want to hire them now, then you could delay the actual meetings. But if they anticipate having to slowly build their skill set to be able to sell themselves for like a different kind of job, then I would recommend starting a little bit earlier.
Okay. I think you're going to get to this, but we've had a lot of questions around how do you ask for the informational interview if you don't already have a contact, and how do you find how are you going to find the hiring managers at the companies that you're interested in? And
absolutely, and we are going to get to that, so that is super. And right now, I'm going to start that process a little bit. So if you've decided you want to meet with the hiring managers, then you need to figure out who they are. So I recommend that people take this spreadsheet and found a company name, and this would be the second half of it. So you want to, when I say titles of the immediate supervisor for the job, it would be a functional title. Like, you don't need to actually know if they're an executive director or managing director, but the person who runs this group. And the reason I have two columns for the boss is sometimes it can be helpful to meet with the immediate supervisor or the big boss. One of those could be like the boss and a helpful contact. If you want to get a sense of who jobs report to, so there might be several immediate supervisors like desks in finance, for instance, and then a big boss that's the head of the group as a whole. And whichever we get an introduction into could be a useful place to start. And then what you would do at this point is to get the person connected to the hiring manager. That's a great place to go to LinkedIn, and we can do that in a second. And sometimes, if it's a small organization, you may not have an immediate contact right away, and so we kind of work on the indirect things. And the column would be where you have connection into the company, but not quite the right part of the company, and you would be trying to find out the name. And trying to find out who does things is is not that difficult, in that it's not that big a favor to ask somebody who runs this group, who does this. Can you try and find out, even if God forbid, people are doing job postings, try to find out who's got that job. That's the sort of thing that an alum that you don't even know might be willing to help you with if you ask very politely, shoot them an email, ask a favor, or call. And second-degree contacts that aren't very close will also often be very willing to do that, give you an email address, etc. Sometimes you can call the company and just ask. If you're having trouble with reception on answering your questions, sometimes asking for someone in the sales area, they're usually really happy to talk to anyone and are pretty open about being able to give you information. But we can do a sample as well. Here's an example. So we don't see the company here, but in this case, we're going back to Angelo Gordon, the big hedge fund. And so if we're looking to talk to, now let's say I was the analyst, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to do sell side or buy side. And let's say I decided on buy side, and I wanted to go to Angelo Gordon. That's one of my places I targeted because of various reasons. And I'd be an analyst, and I believe I would report into the portfolio manager. And in the area I was in this case, sort of in a net lease section, I see from looking on their website and looking on LinkedIn both that it would be Kaplan, and then the big boss would probably be Gordon Whiting. And I look connected to both of them through Marissa Mackey, and I'll show you how I did this. Marissa's someone I know quite well, and if I were qualified to be a net lease analyst, which I can assure you I am not, Marissa would be happy to introduce me, and in fact, she has introduced me a bit. If we have some time at the end, I'll actually do this search for you. But what you do is you go into advanced people search. So the default on LinkedIn, it's always set at people, and on the right of it, there's a little bar that says advanced, and it gives you lots of fields you can put in. And I recommend that you put in the company name that you're looking to find contacts at, or the organization, and then you put in just some keywords. I don't recommend you use the industry or the job function often. You put in keywords until you start finding the people that you need. And if you have built up your LinkedIn network depending on how gregarious you are, most 100, 200, 300, depending on your field, and you do have a decent amount of contacts in your industry, you'll be surprised at how many second-degree contacts, and that means you only need one person in the middle to introduce you may find. And we're going to talk about exactly how to get that introduction. Start with the telephone, because I often forget to talk about the telephone, because many of my clients are a little nervous about this, a little uncomfortable asking for favors. I would be the same way, and they would much rather do it in writing, but I like to remind people that the phone is fine, and if it's quicker to do the phone, I absolutely recommend it. If you're nervous about it, though, I recommend that you even try writing out a script, and since I do recommend that you follow up by phone if you don't get an answer, this is a tool that everyone may be using, and you practice. I also recommend that you don't leave messages at the beginning, because the ideal way to ask for anything is to get the person live. It's a little harder to say no to a nice voice on the phone than just ignore a message. And so I suggest that you don't leave messages and you just kind of call and try before work, after work. You get an administrative assistant that you just say you're on the road, you'll call back later. And you try calling and having your number show. You can also try calling and blocking it, depending, and some people are more likely to answer one than the other. And only leave a message if, you've tried a number of times at different times of the day. And then I would definitely leave a message and follow that up with an email. And I'll give a little tip for anyone who's job hunting. It's very easy to make mistakes. And one of the lovely things about voicemail that not everyone knows is on all voicemails, if while talking, you realize you're not thrilled with the way your message is going, you hit the pound sign. And most of the time, almost always, it'll give you an option to erase and re-record. That can be helpful in one's personal life as well. And I'm going to talk about a really valuable tool, which is doing this by email using a two-part email. This is not something most of you will have seen before, and we came on this fairly organically by just discovering it works and recommend it very widely, and my clients have found that they have a very good success rate for introductions this way. The idea is that you send out to the person, the introducer, the person you have in common. That would be Marissa Mackey, who knew those guys I wanted to meet over at Angelo Gordon. But I don't just ask her to introduce me and leave it in her hands. There's a couple reasons. One, she's busy and mean well, but not do it. Or two, she might say all the wrong things. She might get confused and describe my work history incorrectly. She might say I'm looking for a job, and then if they don't have exactly a job that sounds perfect the way she misdescribed me, they'll just that will be the end of it. You control over what she says about you. So there's a great way to do that works pretty well. What you do is you send a really careful email to the person you have in common, much more focused on them than the Gmail. It takes quite a work to do this, but you'll get a really good success rate generally. So this example, let's say I didn't talk to Marissa often. If it's someone I hadn't talked to for a while, I would Google her. I'd find out everything she was up to. I've often done this with genuine, acquaintances or friends of mine, and discovered they got married, discovered they had a new job, discovered they moved to a city and I didn't know, someone I don't talk to all the time. So definitely always Google them and spend some time looking at their LinkedIn profile so that you can reference appropriate things and show, interest in them. So that's the first paragraph. So the black, and I'm going to do a few of these, and you're going to have access to this, and I don't expect you all to remember it, but I really wanted you to have some helpful resources that you could use for today. And so I've included I don't have any more resources I can share with you other than these, but put everything in the slide, so it'll be great. This is an example of how to do the email. It's 4 paragraphs, which sounds a bit long, but the first paragraph is the small talk. The second one is explaining what you're asking, that you're asking the introduction. And the purple is the rating. Now, if you're a typical MBA alum, you're thinking, oh my God, that's ridiculously long. I would never write an email that long in a million years. But what we're writing about is not how great you are. You're writing about the person you want to meet. And it's that you want to meet them very specifically, that you've done a lot of homework, that you have a genuine specific interest in their company, and what that tells the person you're asking the introduction of is that you're not going to embarrass them. Their worry is that you're going to bother their friend or their former colleague. You're going to make them look bad. And this is showing that you're not going to make them look bad, that there's a good reason to meet, and the person that you're asking me to introduce to, maybe they'll be happy, maybe they'll thank them. And then you explain. This is where it gets funny. This is the new way, the new aspect of this. You explain to them that you know how busy they are, and you're going to draft the introduction for them, so don't have to take the time and figure out what the heck to say about you. Sometimes people are concerned that the receiver will find this presumptuous, that you're writing the email for them, but they really don't. And even if, I don't know if they do, no one's ever seemed to, and it doesn't matter, it works. They will forward on the introduction, and you'll have a little control over the quality of it. And then you end the email. But the email is really over, because then you're going to have a second part of the email. I recommend you indent it, maybe put it in a slightly different color. One's black, one's blue, that sort of thing. And you pretend you're them, and you start the email for them. And this is the next part. So you pretend them, and you talk about you in this third person. So here's an example. And you might think this is a bit silly, because we're referencing some sort of jokey things about drinking and this and that. But one of the things I found, and I think I could have proved this in a scientific study, is that when there is a social aspect to the connection, people are more likely to get the meeting through that than through being qualified or having any other thing. Because if you think about it, if a good friend asks you to do something and it's not outrageous, you're just going to do it. You don't need to ask, like, is this a good person? Like, is this person really that great a worker? Your friend asked, you'll take the time. It's not always a friend, so again, it would depend on the social aspect of it. This is, again, just basically paraphrasing why you want to meet them. But think about being the person that this is describing. Think about being told that a friend of your colleague is fascinated in what you do and has studied it and knows all about it. It's going to seem like it would be pleasant to meet with this person that thinks what you do is so great. And so that is sort of the end of the tool, and the two-part email. And if you're wondering how long this all takes to research 2 different people and write these very long, thoughtful emails all about why you want to meet the person, you're right. It takes a long time. It gets quicker over time, but not as much as you think, because you're doing each one individually. But the beauty of this is you're not doing this in a scattershot way. You're doing this to meet very specific people that you believe are potential hiring managers if they had a job, and you want to get in front of as many as possible of them. About 20% of all managers are either hiring or going to be hiring in the next while. So you want to meet with as many as possible so that the timing works out. One of them is going to like your background and sort of need someone, or like your background and not need someone out, but remember you when they do. And, of course, you'll keep in touch. So this is sort of summarizing how to do this. You can also do it directly, of course. You can asking the friend to introduce you and write directly. And this is just summing up how you would do that, and we have an example. And again, these are things you can spend a little more time looking at later on your own, and you'll have these tools for yourselves. So in starting with the connection, emphasizing the social aspect, keeping the focus on them and their work or their firm. That is not what we're told to do in a regular cover letter. Think of the classic cover letter. There's a couple paragraphs, and they're all about how great you are. And if you're writing directly to someone, you might want to put one or two things just so that you're somewhat credible. But generally, the more show your fascination in them and your knowledge of them, you'll show that you know what you're doing by how thoughtfully you're talking about them in your business and why you want to meet them. You don't need to sell yourself in this case, and actually it will be less effective in my experience. Number 3, acknowledge they're probably not hiring right now. That is magical. Any part of your search, make it very clear that you're not looking for a job. You're probably not hiring right now. I want to talk about to you for sort of the long term. I'm really interested in your group long term or your company or whatever. Because even if they're hiring right now, they're going to consider you if you're right. You don't need to worry about that. But as soon as you start talking about a job, then someone's going to ask you to send their resume. And if they ask, obviously, do send it. But then all of a sudden, you're being evaluated for a specific job that they may or not have. You make that connection regardless. And lots of people who aren't consciously hiring today are realizing they need help tomorrow. And a lot of people that think kind of like your background from looking at your resume, if they met you, would see why you are the right person. Again, generally, you can sell yourself better than your resume can. And the other thing is, sometimes people think they need, if they're on a phone or in an email, that they need to explain everything under the sun before they ask for the meeting. Sometimes, especially on the phone, they'd rather make plans with you and get off the phone and have a long discussion. So definitely recommend trying to remember that the goal is getting on their calendar. In person is always best if they are looking in the same city. And the reason is, if they like you and they're suddenly seeing the connection, they don't think you're right for their group, but you could be someone else. There's always that option of them saying, hey, maybe my boss can talk to you right now. Or, no, you'd really be better over in prime brokerage. I think those guys are in. Let me see. And you can sometimes get another meeting right then and there. And the other is suggest some specific times, and don't hesitate to email twice. I used to think that if they didn't answer your email, you had to like call it then and there, but you don't. The second is actually kind of ridiculously effective. And some examples, we don't need to go over these in great detail, but here's a sample. Now, most of my templates are based on real case studies. This is more of a template, but it's giving you some ideas of different ways you might do this. So this is one that's a little bit more selling the person than you might. So the second paragraph is sort of optional here, and as you'll see, this is a bit of a joke. I realize as we go on. But these are actually real people, by the way, and with their permission. So this is you're bringing up in the first paragraph the social aspect. You are referencing a person. You're just not going through them. The second one, he is making a more of a pitch as to why he wants to talk. But I'd like to just add that's not always at all necessary. And suggesting some specific times. So this example that would still be through someone else. And then here's an example, it's the same idea, where it's totally cold. And these do work, obviously not as often, but they often do work. Here is one that I think is very well designed in that it's really showing the value right then and there and keeping the focus on what one guy could do for the other guy. So those are some samples as well. Questions right now, Christine?
We sure do. And there seems to be a lot of questions around even the step prior to sending this email template. And so questions around if you're changing industries or coming back from a career hiatus, how can you use this strategy if there's not a connection within the industry they would like to change into?
Well, I would challenge them that there often will be a connection, second degree. So even if I've maybe been home raising my children for, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years even, if a considered effort to through LinkedIn. It's not the only way, but through LinkedIn to link to maybe my spouse contacts, all my friends, look up some alumni people, my former colleagues from even way back in the day. Some of them will still be, they will all be retired. Some of them will still be on LinkedIn. Chances are I will have a lot more contacts than I realized in my kids' parents, right? There's all kinds, PTA connections, anything. Often an alumni, certainly you all went to Harvard Business School, and which are pretty well represented in almost every industry, and I will have some connections where I'm able to set up. I would start with genuine informational interviews at that point, and maybe a lot more, especially if I'm really making a big change, a lot more of them than I might otherwise, talking to people in all different levels and areas of the industry I'm considering, and each one of those I'll be more impressive on the next one because I'll know more and more. I'll gain some confidence. I may, if I'm returning from a career break, I may find some opportunities to do a little project work so I can get some current professional experience on my resume, depending on what it is. Even, if it's possible that volunteer experience would make some sense if I'm interested in moving into not-for-profit, or I could do a project or class as a way of getting sort of professional paid work as well. So there's going to be some options there. But generally, when people tell me they don't have a network, when we sit, I'm always happy to share my network with my, active clients, but we rarely have to. Usually they have much more of one than they realize when we expand their network via LinkedIn and their alumni connections.
Great. What about the type of position? Would this work regardless of the level of the position? For example, if you were looking for a C-level position, since that seems to be very much of a hidden job market?
Yes, it absolutely would. Obviously, it's sort of the same process. If you're employed, again, you have to be very careful how you do it, and so you need to, for confidentiality. Think of other business reasons you might be talking to these people so that you can, if you get sort of seen, you can have something to say about why. Certainly, C-level positions do go through recruiters as well, though, and there are certain areas where the hidden job market just isn't where it's at. So very senior positions in not-for-profit and education at certain organizations almost always go through retained searches, in which case would be not the main process. This would be an unusual process and a sort of supplemental process. Mm-hmm. But I do think that this works much the same way at any level. Now, there are industries and parts of industries where fewer people are on LinkedIn, so it's much more difficult to make those connections. And so certainly at very senior levels in some industries, in consulting, et cetera, everybody's on LinkedIn, but very senior people in some industries are not. And so it'll be the same process, but a much more old-fashioned way about going about it, which would involve asking people. You'd take the same spreadsheet with a list of companies, but you would call or email people and ask if they know anyone in these roles.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so that's another question that has come in around what is the technique different depending upon the industry? And you're asked that is true?
It works everywhere. If you can't find the connections, then you need to go dig a little deeper and go some other routes to find them and maybe do it by hand. I think it does. My employee's boyfriend works in a unbelievably different industry than this. And when I was chatting with him about getting more work, we discovered that in this area that I never would have dreamed the people who make the decisions were on LinkedIn. They're very active on it. So I wouldn't assume anything about any industry. But the process works if you can find the connections. But there are times when not very many people, there's certain areas of real estate where not that many people are on LinkedIn. So that becomes less of a powerful tool. But you also have the alumni databases as well, and there's other things. Sometimes then it's like an individual problem-solving thing. Right. So we sometimes have to dig a little deeper to find the connections, but then the same process will work. I do want to encourage you that this whole 2 email deal takes forever, and if you can skip it, do. I mean, if you can just get your introduction another way and you trust the person to get then skip by all means. And if you think you can go directly and you're pretty confident that they'll meet with you, then go directly. This is for the shy and this is for the shy and reluctant to network among us, which is so many.
Right. Okay. So again, a lot of questions coming in around specific strategies if you're trying to relocate.
Well, I actually find this works really well with relocating. It almost works better in some ways, and it's the same process. But basically, what I recommend people do is they pick a time when the ideal way is when you can travel to the city, and you get 3 business days, 2 business days, 5 business days that you're going to come, and then people are bizarrely more willing to meet with you when you're only in their city for a short period of time. And you're going to say, oh, I'm meeting with a bunch of people in the, distressed investing space, and I would love to, I'd hate to come to town. You can kind of imply you're coming for an interview with another company, one of their competitors, but, I've always admired you guys. I'd love to meet with you. And I found people have got more meetings than they can do by doing that. It can work very, very well. And sometimes you can also set up a round of calls in advance, but I find the trip thing works remarkably well, and people are always shocked how well it will work for them.
Okay, great. Another question here is, can you talk a little bit more about the potential social connections? For example, if your connection is a work colleague that you've known for a long time, but you don't necessarily, you're not necessarily wine enthusiasts together. Another example of that, of a social connection.
I'm confused. Is it a colleague or is it just pure social connection?
Well, the question is, can you talk more about potential social connections if your connection is a work colleague that you've known for a long time, but you don't necessarily enjoy a similar social activity together? Okay.
Well, I think you don't need to go there. You could just, you can skip the small talk. You can make work small talk. If it's a social thing, I think it's a very social thing, like you're trying to get a connection through, let's say you're a woman and you know that the spouse of someone else and who you're dropping your kids off is in the field you want to get back into. Those are sometimes a 2-part process where you slowly build some credibility, I'm just going to be a little stereotypical, with the other mom and let her know what you do, and you stop wearing sweatpants to pick up the kids, and you slowly build that credibility, and then you might ask for the introduction to her husband, or, it could be wife, of course, in that situation. That's just one that has come up a few times, and sometimes you don't have that credibility right away if it's social, if they've only known you in a way that they don't realize. If it's a work thing, I think you can just be a bit more businesslike about it. But if you show the connection to the person you want to meet in a way that it's clear that you will look good, you'll do them proud, you won't embarrass them, you'll be prepared for their contact, the person won't be with them, I think it's absolutely fine. It doesn't have to be so warm and fuzzy.
Have found that this technique works better for men versus women by industry?
So I haven't noticed any patterns there at all. I had one client tell me that when she was writing cold to people, it seemed like women were more responsive, but I'm not sure that that's necessarily the case. And again, when you write the 2-part email, for instance, a ridiculously high percentage of people do get that introduction. The person will forward it on. It does always get you your meeting, though. It will get you your introduction, and it's still up to you sometimes to follow up with that person. But it gets the percentage of time that people got the meeting. I had my clients focus more and more and more on the work the target person was doing, and less on their own strengths. The percentage of meetings people got were much greater.
Can you talk a little bit about, in using this technique and really staying on task, what do people have to commit to in terms of the time to get the job that they really want?
Well, it really depends on the person. I certainly, and a lot of other things are huge factors here. I think that time works out because generally people that aren't working have more time, but they also might have a slightly harder search because they're not working, and that's, working people are slightly more popular with hiring managers. The 5 O'Clock Club says they recommend people that are working spend a total, including nights and weekends, of about 15 hours a week on their search, and unemployed people 35. In my experience, people get jobs spending quite a bit less. But again, the more the quality of the time they're putting in and the severity of their current experience to what they're trying to get a job in are a bigger factor than necessarily the time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to make a dramatic move, or even if you get the same kind of job, it just tends to be a lot quicker, even in a declining industry, than switching jobs, even if you're switching into a growing industry, on average. But that is, a big generalization.
Okay. We have a few more minutes left here, so I want you to be able to finish up with your slides.
Oh, great. Well, I'm glad there's been some interest. And again, this is an art, not a science. I will definitely say that. But these hopefully are some new techniques that you can take away and use this week. Just want to talk about following up. The second works a lot of the time. And again, this could be following up the introducer or the final person when you have been introduced, but they haven't really made the appointment with you. So here are some examples of phone calls that you might, this would be a cold phone call that would be quite different if you were going to make that, but it's just good to get some examples. And I always recommend that people practice on the phone, absolutely. You can practice a friend, it will help tremendously and show a lot of enthusiasm. Basically, I just wanted to say that the next step of this, and that you would want to work on, is figuring ways to, once you get your exploratory meeting, the step, sometimes you get the meeting, they seem to like you, but it's somehow not progressing. And so, best practices in interviewing is the next thing to be trying to work on if you're working with one of the Harvard Business School alumni coaches or a private coach. How to sort of build their enthusiasm and excitement, and you almost want to build their dissatisfaction with the idea of not having you there, taking care of their problems or building new business for them. And that's just sort of the next step of this. But once you get the meeting, you're a long way there, and that's the part that I find so many clients would like a clear roadmap of. So that's what we sort of tried to do here. And so you have the spreadsheet here so that you can create that. And I just wanted to mention, I would love to help everyone more with these tools, but I have included them. And I just have to give a little disclaimer that I won't be able to get back to people with emailing them anything to do with this, because I'm going to be going out of town for 10 days, which is too bad. And when I get back, I certainly will be open to chatting with anybody who wants any individual help with this, but I also encourage you have an amazing Alumni Career Services department, the best that I know of, and of all the business schools, and to use their help and resources as well.
Great, Sarah. That was a wonderful endorsement of our office here, so thank you.
It's true.
Do you have any last comments or a sort of groups you want to make to our audience before we close out the program today?
I think one suggestion, it would be to really create that spreadsheet and list all the organizations you're trying to get into, exactly who you're trying to meet, whether it's peers at this point or hiring managers, and really just work on getting those names very clear in your mind, because there's something about knowing who you want to meet that makes it happen. You'll solve those problems, how to get into them. Once you get the name, the position, and the organization, your hard-working, problem-solving minds are going to make it happen.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I do just want to reiterate, Sarah is available to take your questions, but please know that she's going to be out for a couple of weeks, and we'll get back to you at a later date. So thank you again, Sarah, for sharing your knowledge with us today. This is a terrific, a very tactical presentation, and I think that's great. Folks will be able to use this information and put it into practice pretty quickly. If you're interested in hearing this presentation again, or you wish to register for any of our upcoming webinars, We ask that you visit our career homepage, again, at www.alumni.hbs.edu/careers. And our next webinar will be on Wednesday, April 4th from 12 to 1 p.m. And we are hosting Teaming, How the Learning Organization Works. Our guest presenter will be Amy Edmondson, the Novartis Professor of Leadership and Management here at HBS. If you have any questions about today's webinar or you'd like to contact Alumni Career and Professional Development for any reason, we can be reached at 617-495-1433 or at career_advisors@hbs.edu. Thank you so much for joining us today and have a great day.